Let's talk about platooning here. This has been under development. It has slowly rolled forward. Peloton is one company that in particular has been working on this technology, has been one of the leaders, I guess, out there in media events. Josh Switkis, the president, co-founder of Peloton, was on the TT panel at ATA's conference. We have a couple slides and a video I want to show. I think he did a real good job of breaking down just exactly what platooning is. So why don't we start our deeper look into platooning by turning to the video clip of Josh, and we'll be back to talk about it further.
What you heard about a minute ago is platooning. The basic idea is to take the active safety systems that many of you are buying today. So you may be buying the Meritor Wapco OnGuard system, Bendix Wingman, or Detroit Assurance. Take those systems and connect them between a pair of trucks. So we have a direct wireless link between the two trucks. You can think of it sort of like Wi-Fi, but it's an automotive standard, much more reliable than Wi-Fi. And there's a constant communication link between the trucks. So whatever the front truck does, the rear truck knows about it basically instantly. So within about 1/100th of a second. So immediately when the front truck accelerates, we automatically accelerate the rear truck right along with it. When the front truck applies its brakes, we know about that immediately. We actually know about it before the brake lag has occurred. So immediately when the brakes are applied, we're sending that information to the rear truck. So we're actually typically braking in the rear truck before the front truck has slowed down. This is something even the best driver in the world, even the best sensor in the world can't do because there's nothing to sense yet, right? It's before that truck has physically slowed down. So this creates a very high level of safety. We can prevent the most common accidents on the highway, which are these frontal collisions caused by just not reacting in time. And we do this completely automatically. So if your drivers are not paying attention for a few seconds, if they sneeze, something like that at the wrong moment, the system will still react for them. This type of system and the underpinning of it, the collision mitigation system, has shown great safety benefits. There are fleets we've talked to who, when they added collision mitigation and lane departure warning systems, have seen an 80% reduction in accidents. So I encourage all of you, even outside of platooning, if you're not already looking into those systems, please do. They can have a profound safety impact.
Okay, we're back, and thank you, Josh, both for doing the panel. Peloton provided some information that I'll input a little bit later as we talk about some of the questions. They're not an active participant in our Live on Web today, but we're kind enough to devote some time to try to provide some information. Fred over here, he has taken part in platooning demos. Bendix is involved. We're going to get into that in a sec. Why don't we go to a clip of Fred? He is part of this demo. Let's take a look at this clip, and we're going to come back, and Fred's going to tell us about what the experience was like and a little bit more about platooning. So let's go to that clip now. Okay, if you look very closely, if you've noticed today, that finger that you saw in that video, that was Fred's finger. That was him. So, all right, I'm kidding about that, but let's turn to Fred here. Why don't you walk us through a little bit what we saw, what went on there, and what that experience was like.
Well, it was my finger, but I was also driving too, so that's where the rest of me was at that point in time. So what we were taking a look at is, first off, Bendix is working with Peloton and has been working on, and you probably recognize some of the graphics. That was the Peloton system, which we are working with them, as well as with others in terms of platooning. But what we did in that particular case is we were engaging the platooning system. So as the driver, I flipped down the switch, and what the platooning system did was it first of all said we were too far, then it said we are ready for platooning, and then it brought the trucks together, okay, to about a 12-meter following distance, which is around 39, 40 foot, and we kept platooning at that distance for a bit of time. So the things that you saw is, first of all, that little monitor I wanted to point out. The monitor is also not only for bringing in information about the system, but it relays the video from the forward camera to the rear, the forward truck camera to the rear truck. So that rear driver, in that particular case, that was me, is able to see what's going on in front of the forward truck. The system is using the 5.9 gigahertz DSRC communications to work together to bring things into the platooning function. And one of the things you didn't get to see, but I did get to experience, which really impressed me about the system, was that when the truck in front of me, the brake lights would go on, almost instantaneously, my brakes were being applied to, again, help maintain that platooning distance between the vehicles. So it's a really impressive system, and it's still in testing. So we still have some work to do because demos are always great, but it's the real world where things get kind of screwy. So, but it is very impressive in terms of how it works.
So the North American Council on Freight Efficiency, they took part in our panel at ATA's conference, and just beforehand, they released one of their confidence reports on platooning. I'm not speaking on their behalf, but they were kind enough to provide us a few slides. I just want to quickly go through a few of their findings. The full report and some videos and other information is available on their website. Some of the benefits, fuel economy is always touted. Their findings, what they call real world, is about 4% on average. The front truck, I know at least in the demos of testing, the rear truck sometimes is talked about up to 10%. Lot of real world factors out there. You see them listed. What routes, what equipment is being used, congestion, all sorts of other factors. They were very open about challenges. They interviewed a wide range of people. ROI, we'll get into that in a minute. That's something, no matter what we're talking about, that's always important. How quickly would drivers accept it, especially the second driver? Maybe we'll touch on that in a minute. System security, Fred touched on that. Cybersecurity is always a growing question in this conversation. How reliable? I think my experience has been, at least in the demos and some of the real on-road that I've done and seen, I'm still here to talk about it, so that's a good thing. Some of their findings, recommendations, I do want to point out, this came before we were talking about it. Unfairly grouped as autonomous, the slide before. It will increase adoption of safety technologies. Some of these same themes that we have been talking about comes from their report. Driver stress less than perceived. That can. We've got some questions about it. Some I think might be a little skeptical of that, but that was their findings. They're talking to a lot of drivers, a lot of fleets. So again, that is NACFE. Their confidence report on two-truck platooning. I want to point that out too. We're talking about two-truck platooning, and we're going to come back to that in a minute as well. Why don't we also go to a slide that Peloton provided to quickly look at regulations in relation to truck platooning. This was provided a few weeks ago. I don't know any updates yet. As you can see, this map is pretty filled in. 10 states listed for approval. Michigan, I know, is one that's looking further at there's some pending legislation there. I don't think it's passed yet, but it still might this year to make it even easier there. Michigan is one state very interested in this. Nevada, you see states in process, different levels. A lot of this is about following distance. So following distance rules may be on the books, meant for safety, obviously. This platooning concept sort of changes the picture about, tailgating, what sort of dangerous tailgating in a platooning situation. maybe safer. So on some, it's as simple as what is the letter of the law within that state. I'll mention where we did the conference in Nevada. They're a state, whether it be the self-driving, platooning, they're another example of a state very active, interested in nurturing this technology, working with the trucking industry, fleets, suppliers. And so the platooning is one area more than the driverless stuff where you see from that map. Things are developing quickly, and I'm sure it will continue to. In fact, and I want to turn it to the full panel now. Peloton made the case that in 2017, their system could begin to roll out, maybe in some limited applications, some real-world applications. Do you see that this could happen? You're involved on some level. I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but you're involved in these demos. Where do you feel that platooning stands right now?
So where I think platooning is it's getting to the point where we can do some real-world testing of the platooning system, meaning real routes with real fleets, with real drivers, and to see what's going on. Because from my perspective, there's still a lot of questions that we have to answer about platooning technology. The impact on the driver, the impacts on the vehicle, the combination of maintenance and everything that goes into braking system and such from that standpoint. So I appreciate Peloton's optimism, but I think that more realistically, we'll see 2017 doing a lot of field trials and testing. That information comes back in, and that's really going to probably dictate the timing of a launch. Could be as early as 2018, maybe a little later, like 2019.
But things are happening here.
Things
There's no
are
way
happening.
around it. Even the biggest skeptic needs to leave here today understanding, at least on
yes.
the platooning side, this is happening.
It is moving forward, and that's great. But I also think people sometimes get confused that, we need to have platooning first before we get to autonomous vehicles. And really, they're parallel paths. Platooning is an application of autonomous or automated technology. And so that has an evolution path on its own, as does the automated to autonomous vehicle development. So we're not giving up everything at Bendix to focus in on platooning. We're focusing in on that, but we're also focusing in on how we improve our advanced driver assistance systems.
Yeah. I think it also helps to keep in mind that this first generation of platooning that we've been talking about still involves active steering from the driver. So it's feet off the pedal, but still hands on the wheel and eyes on the road. That's going to be the first generation of platooning that we see in the relatively near-term future.
Yeah.
So I'll jump in terms of what Daimler showed and Seth alluded to. I was in Dusseldorf in March, where they did a 3-truck platoon, and it was also autonomous platooning. It was a Peloton system for now, and they made very clear at the panel and otherwise. Everyone is steering, front, back, and they're focused on 2-truck. That is what the confidence report we talked about, and that's where we're starting. I think longer term, there will be continued advancements where you figure there would be some automated steering. Seth was in Germany on a separate trip and experienced that, and you figure possibly longer term there could be more than 2 trucks. What I experienced, and I was in the middle of 3 trucks, this was on a public road on the Autobahn. So there were other cars in the left lane, and on those roads they go by awfully quickly. It's not a myth, they sure do. I was in the middle one, driver hands, feet off the wheel, and what happened was the first truck was at the set distance. Behind us, a set distance, one of their cars, a Mercedes car, came and cut us off. I cut between the second and third. Not so much that there was a jarring stop, but enough that automatically, no driver assistance, automatically expanded back the distance. We followed on this Highway Pilot Connect. That's a system that Daimler Freightliner has. The Hoover Dam was, and then as soon as the car exited, automatically they came back and you watched the distance on the Highway Pilot Connect, looked in the mirror. The people in the first truck, I talked to them when we got out, they had no idea that this had happened. They almost regretted that they were in the first truck as opposed to what I was seeing. They went back, went up, no hands, feet off, and again, that's not where we are now, 18, 19, that was a demo, it was a real world, but it was a demo, but it does show that the movement, the possibilities that are there. I see questions coming in to stick on the 3 trucks. We are starting in 2 trucks. I know that at the Daimler one, they talked about, hey, we could do as many as 10 trucks, hypothetically. That's a football field, if you think about it that way. From Peloton, I talked to the Peloton executives. There is some sort of diminishing returns as you get further back. Some of the fuel economy you may lose. But you need to start with 2. That was their message. You need to start with 2. You need to do the steering. You need to show it's safe. You need to get acceptance, and then there are other possibilities. I see coming in, well, what about if there are 3 trucks or more in the right lane? How am I supposed to exit? Well, we need to work through this. I mean, there are sensors to say we're platooning. There are ways you can break out of the platoon very simply. You're not stuck in a platoon.
That's right.
You're not stuck there. You tap the brakes, you just get out of it. You're electronically linked, but it's not, otherwise you're fine. So all of those things are developing, but you talked about the electronica, and I just wanted to bring up the 3 or more. That's a question we're getting. Let's go back to some of the braking questions in relation to this that we're getting a lot of. I see both on my screen and here. Let me throw out 2 to start. Will platooning have an impact on disc brake adoption? And also, sticking on the braking theme, what is the minimum braking system requirement for platooning?
So basically, air disc brakes have actually been doing really well on their own, but when you really come down to it, the air disc brake technology is the most powerful braking wheel end technology that's out there. Drum brakes are very good, but drum brakes are still susceptible to fade as well as other issues. Air disc brakes, though, very strong. So our expectation is that at the very least, the tractors are going to need to have air disc brakes in the platooning setup. Best would be to have it all the way around, but at very least the tractors are going to have it. The other thing, too, is in terms of brake functionality and things along those lines, one of the really important things that's going to come down in terms of brakes is going to be the maintenance aspect. Okay? Because even with disc brakes, you want to make sure that those brakes and tires are in good condition. Because if that system has to react to an emergency brake type situation, you want to be sure that both trucks are equipped and prepared to be able to do that. Stability is also going to be important in this case because, again, we still have 2 drivers, at least in this initial vision of platooning. So if the situation calls for it and the driver is able to swerve, he's going to do that, and stability is going to be important. And lastly, the collision mitigation technology. As Josh said in the video and in his clip, the platooning technology utilizes the collision mitigation technology, the radar and the camera to work together. What's important about that is on that forward truck, for example, you want to be able to ensure that you could use adaptive cruise control to keep a safe following distance, or that if things go awry, there's technology that can hit the brakes on the front truck, then we'll apply the brakes on the back truck as that happens. So air disc brakes, good tires, good maintenance, that's going to be important for, especially in the platooning testing, and I see moving forward with it in commercialization.
Let's stick on the equipment theme here. A couple people have asked about, do you need an automatic transmission for platooning related to that? Can it be retrofit? You don't need some new vehicle. Can you just talk a little bit more about some of the other equipment related issues that need to be addressed? Sure.
In terms of the automated manual or automatics versus manual transmissions, doesn't matter. You can do platooning in either of those or any of those situations. In fact, I remember when I was out at Peloton, the first truck I drove in platooning was a manual transmission. What happens is, obviously, if the truck is slowing down, you're going to have to put the clutch in and change your gear in that case. But with everyone moving towards automated manual, automatic transmission technology, I don't think it's going to really be an issue because more and more fleets are going that way. And when you think about the technology you're going to need for true autonomous vehicles, automated manuals, automatic transmissions are really the route that we're going to go. I'm sorry for all the old truckers out there who love manual, but even those guys I hear really like the automated manuals. It is going to go that route. In terms, I'm sorry, I was just going to say in terms of retrofit, I think that's where you wanted to go
Yep,
next.
yep.
Okay. Yes, actually, the technology will likely launch being retrofittable. But keep in mind, you know, your dad's Mac from 1959, it's not going to get retrofitted for platooning, okay? It's going to have to be, you know, more modern trucks with safety technology, stability, collision mitigation technology, obviously the J1939 operating can for that to be retrofit. But we do expect the start of this will be retrofit.
Let me go. I have some more here. It's some that are coming in live, and with a gap of about 12 meters, that's what, about 40 feet or so. We're talking about how fast are you driving? So in your demo, or whether what you showed, what's the approximate speed? Are we talking about highway speeds?
Yeah,
here,
we were
right?
doing 65
And
in that demo.
That was my experience. Just to be clear, I didn't mention that in what I've done have been approximate highway speeds. As I said, certainly not what was going on in the left lane when I was experiencing it. Some scary stuff over there. Fleet acceptance is an issue. A driver, and there's a separate on driver. That's a separate. So let's talk about fleet acceptance, especially. Do you foresee platooning to be done within a fleet or between fleets?
Okay. Well, let's start with the fleet acceptance. In our fleet council demo that we did last year, we talked to our fleets afterwards about what did they think in terms of stuff. And I was actually surprised that for some fleets, yeah, there is that possibility that this could be an option for them. For other fleets, not so much. So they weren't really interested in it. And when you think about it, where platooning works really good are for those fleets that have a couple of trucks that are moving from point A to point B and back and are usually running together. I mean, I think those are the fleets that are going to really start off with it. But when we get into, you know, other types of fleets, again, probably van trailers, we haven't really done any testing on different types, but I don't imagine tanker fleets, I don't imagine they're going to be allowed to platoon because of the risk, you know, two gasoline tankers running together may not be a really good idea. But that, you know, that's where they're going to start, is with those types of fleets where it can work together.
So someone had asked about a flatbed benefit. I'll mention from what Peloton had sent in, feeling that flatbed is less than a box van trailer, less fuel economy, you know, in relation to less rear drag. But again, it is possible. But a lot of this is about the right routes, the right fleets. You know, are they going to work together? I think some ATRI data in the past, I know they're working on a lot of stuff moving forward. It's a little dated now. Said, hey, is our owner-operators going to be more likely to work with owner-operators, maybe? I mean, compared with fleet versus fleet. So who's going to be in the front, back with the fuel economy? I mean, there are a lot of these things still need to be worked out. But I think one thing we're trying to get across is this technology is moving forward. It's a lot of the peripheral issues that still need to be addressed.
Well, let's touch on that inter-fleet versus intra-fleet platooning. From our perspective, it's going to start within the fleet. So intra-fleet platooning is what's going to happen. The reason why inter-fleet platooning or fleets platooning between different fleets, it's a great concept, but it's a difficult implementation because you don't know necessarily how good of a job Fleet A is doing on their maintenance or Fleet B is doing on their maintenance, what their trucks are like, what their driver training is like, and things like that. I would wager that for fleets, their chief legal counsels or their lawyers are going to say, if you want to do it together, great, but not with somebody else until some standards or some things get in that says if you're going to platoon, you have to do this. But the risk is pretty high, and as you mentioned too, it's the who goes in front, who goes in back. That can vary based on load, current weight of the vehicle, you know, the braking system, a variety of things. So I think within a fleet where you could have more control, we'll see platooning blossom for those fleets that it works. Inter-fleet, much farther out there.
Yeah, I know Peloton has made the point that at launch they want to have that interfleet capability. So if there are two fleets that do want to team up and platoon together, that will be possible, but I do think that the general understanding is that this will probably, first go to market and first be, really used in intra-fleet applications.
Yeah, what we saw from our fleet council is that was probably the one question that almost all 25 members of our fleet council were pretty unanimous on. Now we're not going to run with other fleets if we're going to do platooning. So I think there's some work that has to be done to ensure the safety performance, and like I said, some standards that are going to be in place to make sure that if fleets are going to platoon together, these characteristics, air disc brakes, good tires, good maintenance, good driver training, those things are taken care of and certified.
Question that just came in, I just want to get to. Is there issues with controlling platooning between trucks with different powertrains? Different trucks, my understanding is they can work, OEM X and Y will be able to, as long as the system, they both have the system and it'll be set up.
Yeah,
Correct in that?
Yeah, for our demo, we were running a Peterbilt and a Kenworth in terms of things for, different drivetrain, different OE makes. That's not going to be an issue.
Last platooning question, and as we begin to wrap up, I want to get into have a little speed round maybe on a couple of the larger autonomous and futuristic questions. How does platooning boost driver productivity? You still need one driver, one truck. So why am I investing on all this technology for all this? How would I'll get to it. What Peloton we've talked about there. How would you answer that for someone saying, okay, you still need a driver, so
Yeah, so driver productivity, I think the vision on that is, the driver in the rear, maybe less or less stressed or a little more relaxed and can go longer. And there is some proof of that. We saw early on when we came out with adaptive cruise control, for example, that drivers would respond that they felt better at the end of their shift after using adaptive cruise control as opposed to not. So I think that might be where some of that vision comes in. Quite frankly, I think the productivity gains or the gains are in other areas. It's the fuel economy. It's helping to improve the safety. It's probably helping keep the uptime moving forward and such from that perspective, more so than driver. Where the real driver productivity, I think, comes in, as you saw, when you've got one truck that has two pup trucks, if you will, following behind it with no driver in that particular case. That's when you're going to really see that driver productivity shoot up.
You hit some of these bullet points pretty much dead on, so I'm going to go on to say.
And Josh and I did not talk before this.
No, I got this not all that long before we went on the air, but you really hit that on the head.